just a few words about him. His work area is in accounting, financial management, etc. He's an MBA, Bachelor of Economics, and that's his professional life. But he has a life, and also he was a footballer who played for South Melbourne when South Melbourne were at South Melbourne. But he's going to talk to us today about his kayaking excursions, in particular one which is called Bridge to Bridge on the Murray River, about 250 kilometres, which he had hoped to do over Christmas, but certain events intervened, so he had to finish it off over Easter. And he does that to raise money for an organisation called Arrow, which is involved with the support of bone marrow transport patients, people who need bone marrow transplants. And Wennie has raised a lot of money for them, particularly through his efforts in going down the Murray River. So what he's going to talk to us today about that journey, and perhaps a bit about Arrow as well. So would you like to make him welcome?
Well, thank you very much. It's interesting following from Kevin, because the reason that I'm here, I suppose, is because of football. I played, as Dad said, I played football with a few people, and as a lot of footballers have, they have experienced some injuries. I injured my knee in a final when I was playing with West Footscray District League, and I kept running for a couple of years after that, but then realised running was no good, so I had to find a sport that I could sit down in. So I was either horse riding or bikes or paddling. I decided to go paddling, and I was out paddling one day on the Yarra in a fairly ordinary boat, and a couple of guys went past who were members of the Fairfield Canoe Club, and they said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm having a paddle." I said, "Well, why don't you come and join the club?" And that was in about May. So in a very ordinary plastic boat, I went to the club, was able to borrow a few boats, and started getting really interested. And in about October, the two guys who got me interested in paddling said, "Why don't you do the Murray Marathon?" And the Murray Marathon is an event that starts in Yarrawonga. It goes for 5 days. It finishes in Swan Hill, so it's 404 kilometres over 5 days. I've been a very experienced paddler. I've been out paddling for 4 months, so had done 10 kilometres on a couple of days. A couple of days I used to squib the 10 and go for 5 because it was too far. But I got involved in the Murray Marathon, and through that, kept paddling. That's back in 1993. I did my first Murray Marathon, and through that I got interested in long distance paddling and fundraising for, as David said, for the Arrow Foundation. And my main interest there was the Arrow Foundation supports kids, and they, in terms of transplants, and the need for some of these kids to have these transplants to have a normal life is just amazing. So every time I raced, I tried to set up a fundraiser with people. And being in a large organisation like GHD, we've got 4,000 people in Australia. It's nice, you can just click one button, send out an invite to 4,000 people and say, will you support me? And they have at times. But this one, as David mentioned, it was all about what I call the bridge to bridge. Now, as I should mention, Kevin just mentioned something about you weren't allowed to handball backwards. I got engaged to Tricia. Some people know Trish at the end of my uni years, and Trish decided to go home to St Arnaud to teach for a year and be home for a year before we got married. So I thought I might as well play football up there. I did. The first game I was playing in the centre, and I took the ball and I gave a fairly decent hand pass and hit the guy in the back of the head. So the coach came to me at half time and said, "Look, Wennie, don't worry about handballing, just kick it. So different competitions, different games. But this bridge to bridge, my parents came to Australia from the Netherlands. My father ended up in the Snowy Mountains, and I lived in Cooma initially, and then we moved to Kencoven. So for all my secondary education, I had to cross the Murray from Kencoven to school at Corrion, and from Corrion back to Kencoven. Then we moved to Albury, decided to stay with the Victorian system, so then we lived in Albury, so I crossed the Murray again from Albury to Wodonga, because I went to Wodonga High, and then back from Wodonga. So every day of my secondary education, I crossed the Murray twice. So I thought, here's an event, bridge to bridge. Bringenbrom Bridge, if you've ever been up in the Upper Murray, Bringenbrom Bridge is between Kencoven and Corrion. The Swami Plain River comes in just before the bridge, and the Murray comes down from Towalong, and they join together and keep going through places like Tintulbra, Walwa, Jingellic, Waimapunt, and then the Hume Weir, and then into Albury. So it was a 212 kilometre event that I thought I'd do. It didn't turn out as successfully as I had hoped. Won't worry about that at the moment. But so what I'd done is about 3 weeks before the event, I went to Kencoven, to that bridge, to have a look at it, and the water was, a good flow, a nice fast flow, quite high. And I had said to Trish, well, what I should do, and excuse my land crew, although when you're land crew with Trish, you stay in motels rather than tent, but that's beside the point, but very important if you want to maintain some harmony. So I decided I was going to take 2 boats with me, and there are different boats in canoeing. There's what I used to paddle was a K1. A K1 is meant for speed rather than comfort, and a TK1 is a craft that is meant a bit slower, more stable. But the other advantage that it has a trailing rudder. So a rudder is at the end of the boat. So if this was the end of the boat, the rudder would be down there, and it's fairly long, about that long. And the advantage of it is, if it hits something, it just bounces up. And therefore, they are good in rivers that are shallow or have gravel rashes. The Murray in the first part has a lot of gravel rashes, so you have to either be very careful, hop out of the boat, walk it through, and then keep going. But a trailing rudder is very good. But I'd seen the river being so high, I said, I really want to do this in a faster boat. So I only went up with 1 boat. So going up with 1 boat, I got there. The river under the bridge was probably about 1 metre less than it was 3 weeks ago. That's not very good, because the water from there is also influenced by the Murray 1, Murray 2 power stations just outside Kencoven, and depending on how they're letting the water out and if they're generating, can impact on the levels. So I decided to go, and I'm going on, and a K1 has a fixed rudder, and the fixed rudder is, if this is the boat, the rudder is sitting at about 10, 15 centimetres, no, 20 centimetres from the end of the boat. It's fixed, it doesn't flip, so it's a solid piece of equipment you've got sitting at the bottom of the boat. So I'm going through, and if you've ever been along to the Murray River, and the Upper Murray, it's worth going for a trip, because I've done a lot of work on it, a lot of nice tourist spots and lookouts and things done. But they've also banked along the river, put in, since the snow's been there, a lot of big rocks to stop the erosion. And I reckon some of those big rocks have rolled out of position, probably held up a few branches, and I hit one of those and I shattered the rudder. It just came off totally. So a K1 without a rudder is not an easy boat to guide or to paddle. And just for the benefit of those people who aren't familiar with paddling, that's the paddle. It's a flared one. It only weighs 400 grams. It's extra light. And in terms of height, you should have something that you can just about, if you're paddling, you should be just about able to touch the top. So this has got a flexible centre to it, so you can put it in and out. And you can also change the flare. And there's certain, some people have it at 60%, some have it at 65. I have it at 65, and you just get used to whatever what suits your shoulders really. That's the it's not so much the arms. It's just the shoulders. And if you have that flared properly, you get less kind of direct impact on the shoulders and makes life a bit easier. So I was paddling, hit the rudder. I had done 13 kilometres. I was supposed to do 120 that day. So I decided to keep going because my crew was going to meet me for lunch because it's not as if she wants to drive along the road. She says, where are you going to be at what time? And that's where she'll be, but other support is not there. So I thought, okay, I'll paddle on. And the Murray is there. It's reasonably wide, but it's a surprisingly flat river when you consider that it's still 1,000 or more kilometres, probably about 1,400 kilometres from the mouth. So you normally expect a windy river to be when it gets closer to the end, but here it is in the Upper Murray Valley. It's very flat, and therefore the river is very, very windy. So you get around some corners, and on this occasion, on one occasion, I was coming around, and there's trees over there. The water's flowing quite fast, and I'm paddling furiously to try to avoid the trees. I did the first time, and a couple of minutes later, I hit another come around a bend quite quickly, and then I realised I'm not going to avoid the trees. So I'm going pretty quick. So I'm heading for the trees, and I know that if you get a boat caught in trees, you're going to get pulled down. So I'm going along, and at the last minute, the last couple of seconds, I decided, well, okay, I've got to get out of here. So luckily there's a tree up there. I grabbed hold of it, pulled myself up, and the boat kept going, and it hit a log there, and the water behind it kept pushing that boat under the log. So by the time I'd kind of worked my way out of the tree, got on the bank, had a look at it, tried to go back, got myself holding onto the tree, walking back, having a look at my boat, and I could see down under the water. And one advantage of the Murray up there, it's nice and clean, you can see it. The boat had hit another trunk, or another tree trunk, and had wrapped itself around the boat. The front and the back had met nicely on the other side. So there's no way I was going to get it out. So then this happened on the New South Wales border, on the New South Wales side of the border. I knew Trish was on the other side at Tintaldra, and so I did have phone with me. I rang her when I'd lost the road originally. I said I'm going to be slower. I rang her again and said I'm going to be much slower because I've got an hour walk. So I then had to swim across the river to get to the Victorian side, and then got up. And I thought it was about probably 3 kilometres to Tintaldra, so that was okay. As I'm walking along, I'm thinking, gee, this is really good country for snakes. So here I am in a pair of shorts, a t-shirt, and paddling booties. And paddling booties are about that thick, would protect you against anything. All they do is just make it a little bit softer on your feet when you're looking at the rudder. So just as I was thinking, this is a good place for snakes. I kind of looked over there, and there was a nice big black snake. Kind of we looked at each other, and luckily it decided to go that way. I decided to go that way, and we parted friends. So I got to Tintaldra, had lunch. So I'd written a story, and that was David's response to the story that I wrote about the first day. It was supposed to be 3 days, and I everybody who supported me, I said, well, I think I'll do the day 2 and day 3 at Easter, give it away. I think David must have, it was Boxing Day, so, or the date, maybe the 27th then, which you'll be able to see, can't you? No date, yes, no. So David sent me an email, said, almost as exciting as a test, Wennie, so he must have been at the test, and I said I'd finish it at Easter, and I'd also said somewhere in a response that what I should have done is go to the Boxing Day test. I would have been better off at the Boxing Day test. The boats. I should have donated the value of the boat to Arrow. Arrow would have been very happy. The boat cost about $4,000, so it was sitting at the bottom of the doesn't want to move. Why not? Did I go? Sorry. Sorry, it's not moving. Try that. Try that one. Yeah. So that's the kayak that I lost in the Murray. It's, as you see, it's 5.4 metres long. It's called a TK. It's called a K1, which is the type of boats they race in the Olympics. The boat weighs 12 kilos, and if you can make it out of better material and get it under 12 kilos in the Olympics, you get a little weight to put in the boat to make sure your boat's 12 kilos. I have replaced it. I had a thought about what I should do, so I've decided to replace it, and this one is the same one. It's a K1, but it's called a Masters K1. Now this boat, K1, is 42 centimetres wide. So try thinking about you sitting down somewhere and it's 42 centimetres wide. That's how wide it is. So I've kind of adjusted my desire to have a little bit more stability. So that new boat that I'm going to get, which is basically the same as that, it's called a Masters K1 and it's 50 centimetres wide. So I've got an extra 8 centimetres to give stability. And I've noticed that a couple of years ago when I was paddling, you'd kind of brace yourself, and as you get older, I think we all realise, you lose a little bit of stability, and that one, the original one was 42, the new one is 50, so hopefully I can be a little bit more stable and keep going. So I decided to do day 2 and day 3 at Easter. It's not in. If you look carefully, you'll see that's not the same boat as I had as I lost, because I hadn't bought a new one. I had an old TK1, and as I mentioned earlier, TK1 has a trailing rudder, and it is also 50 centimetres wide. So it's more stability, and as you can see, that's the Murray River. It's the time, that spot there when I went to check the first time, that was all water, was all up there. It was much deeper, but it was still flying a reasonable amount. On day 3, I got to Waina Punt, and Waina Punt is about probably 30 kilometres upstream from the Hume Wall, and it's a small punt that you can cross over from either side of the Murray. You can see it's quite narrow. The weir was quite low, but it was very windy, so I'm trying to hold on to the Waina Punt cable and get myself organised into the water, but it was windy. And actually, after about 5 k's on that day, which got me into the open Hume Weir, it was very windy, and a windy spot is not where you want to be in a kayak, especially when it's coming across rather than coming in front of you. So I pulled out of that and decided to go to the Hume Weir. Now I missed those kilometres, that distance, and got into the open lake, and then went down to Hume Weir and started behind the wall. Now it's interesting in terms of doesn't show that much there. No, it doesn't show. But you can see. Normally I can paddle at about do a kilometre in 6 minutes. Behind the Hume Weir, I was doing a kilometre in 5 minutes. And the water was coming out of the weir at the bottom, and it was coming up with some force. So it was about 23 kilometres between the Hume Weir and Albury, and it was probably some of the fastest paddling that I've done. And it's amazing what a bit of flow will do for you. Now I'm just going to go back to that was the bridge. I'm just going to go back here and talk about a little bit about some of the terminology in canoeing that might be of interest. Canoe and kayak, people have obviously heard people talk about a canoe, talk about a kayak. Kayak is a craft that has a rudder, and you can steer that rudder with your feet. So the feet have got a kind of a stick, I suppose, a pipe, bit of that you can just move with your feet. So a kayak has a rudder that is fixed. So people talk about a kayak. A canoe is where you steer with by paddling. So a canoe doesn't have a rudder. If you look back at the Olympic Games, Jessie Fox in her events, on one occasion she was paddling a canoe, and that looks very similar to what she's paddled the next time. But she paddled and the second time she paddled a K1, which is a K1 kayak. She won both goals in both of those. So in one case, she could actually steer with her feet as well as steering with your paddle. In the other case, it's purely all paddle. Historically, they say the mix-up in terms of the name of canoe and kayak came about Queen Elizabeth when they brought a canoe back from Canada, and she called it a kayak. So since then, people have been very interchangeable in terms of canoe and kayak. A K1 is a kayak for one person. As I said before, that's 12 kilos, so they race it in the streams. A K2 is for two people. And in the Olympic Games, for every time the Olympic Games is a number to remember. I was on the board of canoeing from 1998 to 2002. So over the period we were at the Olympic Games in 2000. So I can actually say I'm going to claim, and I do claim, I claim the right to a partnership in at least 3 gold medals or 4 gold medals. The first one was my niece. She swam in 2000 Olympics and she won a gold. I did take her out when I went home to Albury sometimes. My brother was living there. I'd take her to the pool at Bandiana because the only heated pool in Albury at that stage was the army pool, so she'd go and swim there. So I'm claiming part of that. And when we interviewed in 1998, we interviewed Richard Fox for the head coach of Australian Canoeing. Richard Fox, obviously, the next jump is Jessica Fox. And when we were interviewing Richard for the position, there was a small child sitting in the corner. Now, I'm not sure whether it was Jessie or her daughter, but her daughter, the other one also won a gold. So I'm making some claim that I had some input to some gold medals, even if I wasn't of that standard. We mentioned before trailing rudder, very important in shallow water when you've got rocks and that around, jumping. A TK1 is a touring kayak 1, TK2 touring kayak 2, and an ocean racing ski. If you've been down the beach, you'll start seeing people who are paddling these very narrow, very long things. They're 6.8 metres long. They're quite narrow. They've got a big kind of front to them, quite stable, and they're similar. They travel in the same way as a K1, but they've got more buoyancy and they can't fill up. They're not enclosed, but where you're sitting is totally enclosed. So if you go out, it's not going to fill up with water. Single blade, canoeist, person in a canoe would use a single blade. They paddle on one side, and then you hear them yell, and they paddle on the other side, and then they yell again. And whereas a double blade is one of those where you're just paddling forward by yourself. Flat water racing is what you do. I'd call flat water racing in the Yarra. If you had a race in the Yarra, it'd be flat water. White water, obviously going faster. Relative speed. Relative speed in terms of a K1 in the Olympics, it's an interesting number that I noticed. They paddled 1,000 metres in about the same time as they ran 1,500 metres. So if you think about 350, 348 for the 1,500, that's what the K1 did for the 1,000. And I also noticed that if you put another person in the boat, made that a K2, you could improve by about 20 seconds. In the K4, they actually improved by about 40 seconds. So it's, in terms of relative speed, that's what they're able to do. A person has been recorded in a K1 doing 16 kilometres an hour, and that is you just see the boat just flying. It's just amazing when you watch it. Canoe pilots become very, very popular in Victoria now. They paddle in very short boats, and the short, when I should say short boats, would be the width of that screen. I've seen them in the Olympic Games. The Dutch team, they had everybody who was taller than at least 6'3", and they try to fit in these small boats, and they're playing canoe polo. 5 people in a 50-metre pool, and a ball they throw around with 2 goals, and it's become very, very competitive. handicapping, most of the events that I go in are handicapped, and it's luckily they are because they're handicapped on the boat you're on, using. So if you look at a TK1 as opposed to a TK2, K1 against a TK, a person in a K1 would average maybe 12, same person in a TK would probably average about 9. So that's the first handicap in terms of what boat you're travelling. And the next one is whether you're male or female, and the next one is whether you're old or young. So when you do the Murray Marathon, you get a position in the race over the 404 based on your handicap. So a K1 person at the age of 22 has a handicap of 1. I at the moment have a handicap of 0.78, I think, in my boat. So multiply your time by that factor, and that gives you, so they can get ranked. You can have people finish in front of you, but you still beat them on a handicap basis. The boat you saw before that I had is 5.4 metres long. They tend to be either 42 centimetres, 46 centimetres, or 50. They weigh 12. The boat that I'm having made at the moment is going to be a carbon Kevlar, and a carbon Kevlar boat has both strength and lightness, and it's actually only 8 kilograms. And I think as you get older, the hardest part for me in terms of paddling is getting out of the river and getting up to the clubhouse, because I get out here and the clubhouse is up there, and that's after a paddle. You've got to carry that boat up top. But yeah, so 8 kilograms is going to be nice. And as I said, I paddle about 10k an hour. The Olympics 14 to 15k an hour. So anybody got any questions? Go ahead and ask them. I'll give you a couple of handouts that I'll quickly run through later on as to what they are. So that's me at the end of the bridge. Behind me is the Union Bridge. That's the Union Bridge in Albury, just upstream from Noriel Park. And you'll notice that kayak that's a TK1. You can see that it's a little bit wider. It's seen a bit of wear and tear, and but it was the boat for the event because it's got a trailing rudder. Now, in terms of other events, I've already mentioned the Murray Marathon. It's a 404. It used to be run by the Red Cross. Red Cross probably pulled out about 6 years ago. They're finding it hard to get volunteers, as most organisations are that rely on volunteers. 5 days. You start at Mulwala, back of the wall at Yarrawonga. You go to Swan Hill, but you don't paddle the whole way because there's a section in the middle that they can't get your support crews into. It's very low, often floods, so you miss out about 80 kilometres and do a bit more driving. The massive Murray paddle, that's the Murray Marathon being taken over by the corporates. That's now run by Sydney Kayaks, and it's much more a corporate event. It used to be good for schools. It used to fit in the school times because that was in December. It's now late November. The Hawkesbury Marathon, it's my favourite race. It's a favourite race because it is technically very challenging and it's a bit unusual. It's an overnight race. You start anywhere between, and you've got a photo there at the start. I think in your handouts. Yeah, the second slide you've got is one of the starts of the Hawkesbury. The Hawkesbury starts at Windsor and goes all the way to Brooklyn Bridge. It starts, as I said, at 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30, and it has one major stop. The difficulty with it is that you don't have lights, and the race. And the reason you don't have lights is because you can imagine you could put a light on your head, and if you were paddling, you'd be paddling. Every time you did a stroke, you'd see that light reflecting on there, and you just about drive you mad. So you don't have a light, and the other reason you don't have a light is that the race was started 44 years ago as an event on the Saturday closest to the full moon in October. So it was a flexible date, and it's quite amazing with paddling at night. You've got a full moon shining. How much you can actually see. But the trouble is that bike riders and other fishermen have all want a weekend on the Hawkesbury in October, so they had to agree to a date. So the marathon is the Hawkesbury Marathon is actually on the 3rd Saturday in October. So you can be 12 days away from full moon. It's amazing the difference that 12 days makes in the light you can get. And the other thing is that there are a couple of points that, oh gee, you can go down the wrong river. I did go down the wrong way and wasted 10 kilometres up and 10 kilometres back. And on one occasion, it opens up a fair bit. We had a really bad storm, and you think and lightning around. You think you've got a carbon paddle. And there's lightning around, and you're supposed to be paddling to get the paddle high. You want to keep it as low as possible because of the lightning. And there are also corners that, as the way rivers are, if you take it, it gets quite muddy. And if you take it too short, you can end up in the mud. The other ones, there's a Yarrawonga to Cobram, it's 90 kilometres a day. Canberra they've got a 24-hour race that you start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so you do 24 hours once again overnight, but it's fairly close to the Duntroon. There's a fair bit of light around. It's only a 5 kilometre circuit, so you're in the light most of the time. World Masters come around every now and then. I paddled in one of those in 1990. I won a gold medal in that, which was interesting. And then the Australian Masters. Australian Masters, that date was wrong. World Masters 2008, Australian Masters 2019. I went, and you must admit, Masters are a bit of a funny thing because you race in 5-year slots. So as you get older, I did the first Masters when I was about 50. I'm a bit older than that now, so you can find yourself with very little competition sometimes. But you can also find the people who paddle, the ones who are going to do it are serious. You don't get everybody, so you get some serious. But so I only had to paddle the Australian Masters. I only paddled against about 5 other people in my age category. I did the singles on the first 2 days and won 4 out of 4. So I've got 8 grandchildren. Oh, I thought this would be nice. I've got 4 medals. I can give one to each of my grandchildren. But really, I need 8. So, having been in canoeing for a fair while, but I know who are the paddlers, who are the good paddlers. So Martin Finney, who's a guy who's on the board with me, he's president of the canoeing in South Australia. I know his wife is a very good paddler. And I said to Martin, is your wife paddling in the doubles tomorrow? And she said, well, she hasn't. She paddled in the singles. Well, I'll go and ask if she wants it. And she said, and she's a very good paddler. She would have been close to the Olympic standard in her 20s. So we decided to team up. So I was a bit older than she was, but we were paddling in the Bet 65, and we won the 4 races again. So we won the 100, the 200, the 500, the 1,000, and the 15k. So I went home with 8 gold medals, got them engraved, and gave each of the grandchildren one of them, which was nice. That's the map of the Hawkesbury. Started at Windsor, and that's a similar photo to what you've got, and you go all the way to Brooklyn, and you can see that it's quite a windy little section. They have, for an event like this, they have a boat every couple of kilometres that you've got to check in. You've got to call out your number, say who you are. On one occasion, I did actually fall out, ended up in the cold water, and you have to take a bit of warm gear with you. So I sat on the edge of the river for a while until I was picked up by one of these boats. And the other one that was interesting, that one of the reasons I fell out is I hit a Spanish jellyfish, man of war's jellyfish. I don't know if you don't know what the Spanish man of war jellyfish looks like, but they're about that big at the top, and they just go down with tentacles. And I had heard, as I was going along, I kind of hear clunk, 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 and I was hitting a couple, and then all of a sudden I'm going, I put the paddle in, and I've obviously hit one right on the top, and I've just catapulted out of the kayak. And after, that was after probably about 8 hours paddling. I was pretty tired. I tried to get back in, didn't, so I just had to give up and go over the other side and wait for the boat. as I mentioned, sorry, the wrong way. Handicaps are very detailed, very particular, very precise, based on a whole lot of races. Now that's the same K1 I paddled in the race I showed before. But notice that we don't have any lights. We do have little beacons on the front and the back of your kayak. You break those when it gets dark, and they do give enough light that you can see if there's somebody in front of you that you want to chase. And that's the start. You can see that's one start out of at least 3 or 4. There's probably 150, 200 people in there. A whole variety of boats. You can see that one there is a sea kayak. There's a double sea kayak over there. I'm probably in there somewhere, but don't know where. So it's an interesting race in the sense that you can get a whole lot of different people. A lot of schools use it as an event to compete in, and because of the handicap, it gives everybody a reasonable chance to see how they go in their category. So that's me in that 124 in that same boat. The other thing that's interesting about the race is when you get to the end, you just towards the end, about 3 kilometres from the finish, you come around Milson Island. There's a very narrow little gap. You go through Milson Island gap, and you see the bridge. It's all lit up. I don't know if any of us have driven from Sydney to Newcastle. You go down the hill and go down. It's a very, very nice looking bridge. There actually a couple of months ago I was there and they were doing some repair work, and there's a nice little car park around. But as you paddle, you have this optical illusion that the bridge is getting further and further away from you. You think, how am I going to get there? And you do eventually when you get there. It's quite nice. I think that's the Murray. I think it's in your handouts. Now there are some side benefits in paddling. This side benefit here is I picked this little owl up out of the river one morning. I was going along and I saw it was just flooding, obviously just fallen out of its nest. So I went along and picked it up and put it in the boat, and it went down and started nibbling at my toes. And I took it to the vet, and they wanted to know where it was because they'd support it for a while and put it back in a similar spot. So they wanted to know where I'd paddled. It was just down near Fairfield Canoe Club boathouse. So that was one. But the other thing is that it's not unusual in the summertime to see snakes on the Yarra when you go paddling. They're just going across, and we have had 2 experiences where people have going along, and a snake, if the boat's going along and it hits at the side, the snake will go up, and it went up and in. Went into right down the ends, and these people were trying to get across to get out of it. And the other occasion was there were a couple of people paddling down, and they didn't realise there was a snake there was. But it got caught on the rudder, on the trailing rudder. So you got a snake being dragged along behind you, and the 2 people, other people were with them. They just kept getting further and further away. And the snake was just getting angrier and angrier. But eventually you just had to slow down so that you could drop the snake off. But they said it was a little bit exciting for a little while. And the other opportunity I had, I helped a kangaroo once, just around the bend from the Fairfield boathouse. The bank's quite high, and the kangaroo must have come down the bank to drink, but there was a tree that came out, and obviously it couldn't get around the tree. It didn't want to get in the water. But when I went past in the morning, this is say 6:30 in the morning, it looked like it had watermarks up to about there. And so I could have been there for quite a while. So I tried to kind of get behind it and push or shoo it out. And I'm in a K1, so it's not that stable. You don't really want to slow down too much, but I managed to get it out into the river, and it swam, and then got to a point where it could actually get up. And I reckon, even to this day, I still reckon the kangaroo stopped at the top, bowed its head, and bounced away. Some of the wins. So the last Murray Marathon, I got awarded for raising the highest amount of money for Arrow, and I also ended up second in the overall race. So that was a nice outcome. I've got 2 paddles that I don't use, but they're sitting somewhere at home. The other advantage is that going to races, I if it's a kind of a race that is to from without, you can do it without a land crew. I sleep along the river on top of the Jeep with the boat next to me. So you don't need a land crew. But you see some of the countryside. It's interesting, the number of places that you either start from or go to. And it's, there are some very nice rivers in Australia. And the ones that have, the northern rivers that have flooded. But if you look at the, I'll show you the photo there later on. But there's some nice pieces of water. So that one there is. That's the ocean racing ski. I'm actually paddling it, paddling that probably on the Murray near. That's a Cobram race. That one on the other side is that's not me. That's a canoe, a rowing boat starting, but that's at Port Macquarie, the Hastings River. It's a very nice river to paddle on. Quite wide for probably about 15 kilometres upstream. It gets a bit narrow after that and starts winding. The other thing I like is this is actually one of the better better Hawkesburys. The moon. This is the night before. I'm parked on the road somewhere, probably north of Goulburn. I was getting used to seeing the moonlight in front or chasing. Can't tell, but on one occasion in the Murray Marathon, I kind of. If you paddle behind something, it's not like bike riding. You actually gain an advantage of it. They reckon it's about 8%. You can reduce your effort by 8% and still keep going at the same speed. You can do the same in canoeing. So if you sit right behind them, you make that saving. I teamed up with 3 other guys, and we're paddling along, and you do the right thing. You swap around to the front, let someone else. So as a team, you're going much faster. On about day 3, we had somebody tack onto us, and we'd keep changing. He wouldn't change. You shouldn't get upset. It's not going to make any difference to you, but you get upset. You got this guy sitting on the tail, and he won't do his in the front. So we'd worked kind of next to each other. We worked out that I was the quickest over a short distance of the 3 of us. So we said, okay, what we do, we get the 3 of us in a line. I let you 2 go a bit further, and then when you get far enough away, then I sprint. And it's interesting, if you break the cord, it's so hard for the person to catch you again. So he couldn't catch us, and so we just left him behind. And we shouldn't have been nasty, but you are occasionally when you get into a competitive environment. And that's World Masters, Australian Masters, and my 8 gold medals at the Australian Masters, and this is the send up of it that appeared on our website at work. I publicised that one at work with Mark Spitz, and it went around a bit of a joke for a while, and that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Wennie. Now, any questions? Any comments? Anyone would like?
How about your hands? Do they get badly blistered after a 100k?
I used to wear one glove. When you're paddling, if you paddle, you have what's referred to as a hard right, and that hand there doesn't change. You just hold that stays there all the time. This one, as you come over, actually loosens. But with one glove on that hand, I've had no trouble. But some people do. The interesting part in terms of paddling in the cold is that hand, even the slight move, just every time you move, every time you just let it go, that's enough to keep it warm. This hand gets frozen on a cold day.
Any other questions or comments?
And you have to carry quite a bit of water, I gather. Fresh water.
Yeah, it's funny. I drink every half hour, and it's partly kind of a mental thing. Having something to look forward to. I would go on a Murray Marathon. I would fill up water at 2 checkpoints. So I'd probably be drinking over the longest days 96k. So probably 3 to 4 litres of water. And I remember going the first time I went to the Murray Marathon. Yeah, you have the introduction of a few speakers, and I had the medical officer, and he said, "If it's not white, then you're not drinking enough." So you kind of keep that as a rule, and you know what you do, because dehydration is actually a lag indicator that you haven't had enough. It's not a lead indicator. So if you know you're hydrated, if you're needing water, it's too late. You're already dehydrated. Yeah.
Yep. Anyone else? Okay. And just tell us just a little bit about Arrow.
Arrow is a foundation. It's interesting because they do three things, I suppose. They aid mainly kids in terms of needing bone marrow transplants. They have a research foundation where they are trying to find other ways of addressing the issues with bone marrow, and they award a scholarship to a nurse who wants to undertake further training in that specialised field of medicine. So they've been really effective in terms of increasing the number of people who can support, but also in direct support in terms of allowing kids to benefit from the transplants. So I ran into them probably the first time I started doing the Hawkesbury, and whenever I had the chance, I've
So was it? How did it come about that you got involved with Arrow?
I basically got in touch with them after I went to the Hawkesbury. You have a requirement to pay a fee, entry fee, so $200 entry, but you've also got to raise $250
for sub-nominated.
Yeah, and in most of the races you can nominate who they can be, but for the Hawkesbury it was the only one you could nominate was Arrow, and then from then on every time I had a chance of nominating, I just supported them.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, it's not only are you getting enjoyment out of the paddling, but it's going to a very, very worthwhile cause. Fantastic, mate. And we just got some little thing here that you might enjoy whilst you're having the paddle.
Thank you very much.
Instead of sucking on some water.
I haven't had occasions where I've sucked on the water and there wasn't any water there, so that's really terrible.